Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand, CJAD 800.
We started off the show today, and we're going to get to this question again. There were a lot of you that called up we couldn't get to, a lot of text messages, which I did not get a chance to read. We started off by talking about immigration, which has become a very hot-button topic, certainly for the past little while. And when I say past little while, literally in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, big moves, not just provincially, but federally. Yesterday, we had the employment minister on the air talking about what the government federally plans to do about temporary foreign workers, student visas, etc. Prior to that, we had the provincial government announced a moratorium for 6 months on exactly the same categories, maybe a couple of others as well. And I thought, since we're talking about this, we should talk to someone who knows more about this. She's written 2 books about it, in fact. Toula Drimonis is a columnist and author with 2 books on immigration and asylum seekers. So, Toula, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
I would ask right off the top, given what I just sort of ran down, the fact that, both governments have been involved in making decisions in these particular cases, what do you think generally of what you've heard?
I think to a certain extent, a lot of it is justified. And I do feel that the federal government was a little slow on moving on some of these issues with regards to, let's say, international students or foreign study visas. We did need for better regulation to kind of ensure that people were not being exploited. At the same time, I do feel that a lot of it is just basically politics and optics. Post-pandemic, we're dealing with a lot. Canada is not unique in any way. We are dealing with people being insecure, cost of living, housing issues. And some of these, people say that a lot of this is connected to immigration. I beg to differ. To a certain extent, I think some of it might be related, but I don't think it's a direct correlation necessarily. I think, as you mentioned before, it's a hot-button issue. Politicians will use immigration repeatedly, often to just, it's an easy way to marginalize people and to kind of deflect from their own accountability, from their lack of basically ensuring that funds are allocated where they're needed.
It used to be, Toula, when you'd bring up the subject, if you had anything negative to say, it was a matter of you being basically termed anti-immigrant. I think that conversation has changed because, when we talk about housing and social services and the economy in general, people have begun to understand it's not an immigrant issue. There's a lot more to it. Do you feel that's something that's actually happened?
Yes and no. I agree with you that I think it's very simplistic to just quickly kind of dismiss people's concerns and say that everyone who is concerned about these issues or the possibility that we may have had a sudden influx of people coming in that made it very difficult for us, like maybe created severe backlogs or outstripped, provincial and federal governments ability to kind of process applications. I think it is simplistic to just say, people who are concerned are anti-immigrant. That being said, I do believe that there is a segment of the population that is anti-immigrant. And I think, again, immigrants, asylum seekers are a very easy kind of group to basically, accuse of creating every single ill that we're dealing with, I think it's very important to make sure that when we're having these conversations, how we frame the conversation is important, because if we solely treat immigration as a source of our issues, as a source of our problem, or allow politicians to discuss them in that way, then we're forgetting about all the benefits that come with immigration. I think when we have these conversations, we need to consistently remember that we are a country with a low birth rate, with an aging population, most definitely an aging labor force. We have labor shortages. We need immigration. It's as simple as that. Now, how we go about it and how we ensure that our governments are actually held accountable to make sure that when people are coming in, which, by the way, every time I was researching my book, especially the second one on seeking asylum, every single migration expert I spoke to made it very clear that they had noticed migration patterns and population trends were indicating that because of the climate crisis, because of conflicts around the world, people would be moving more. And displaced people will do everything they can to go somewhere safer, right? It's human nature. You would do the same. I would do the same. So I think it befalls on governments to ensure that our politicians are actually held accountable for acknowledging this and doing what needs to make sure that we allocate the funds where they're needed. You know, we have a provincial government that in many ways is kind of speaking from both sides of its mouth. You know, we have Premier Legault who will say, oh, we'll treat immigration as if it's something that's being inflicted on us and we have no power, even though Quebec has far more immigration powers than any other province in the country. And at the same time, we need to remember housing, education, these are provincial jurisdictions, mostly. And they haven't kept up. I don't feel that this government has allocated the funds where they need to be allocated.
Well, you know, and that's part of the issue, obviously. You know, when you bring in more people, you will need more money to be able to provide resources for all these people. But, you know, in the same token, as Quebec having more sort of, if you will, responsibilities on their own than any other province, I think we also get more money than any other province to handle, you know, the situation with immigrants and asylum seekers as well. I wonder, though, Toula, at the end of the day, you know, this seems like a one-sided argument with respect to people who point out, and I will bring up a figure. So there was a national poll that shows 44% of Canadians now think our immigration policy, so nationally, are having a negative effect on the country. And you look at a figure like that and you think to yourself, number one, that's a lot of people. That's almost half of the country thinking that. And then I broke it down, and that's 10% higher than it was only a year ago. And that's a pretty significant increase. And I'm trying to understand why that would be. Why do you think that is?
I think it has a lot to, again, how we frame the conversation. Again, migration experts will tell you, and research shows that, it proves that there's a huge gap between reality and perception in terms of how many people we think have actually entered the country. Like Quebecers, for example, a lot of Quebec will always say, oh, but we're the ones who dealt with the largest proportion of people that came in, right, because of Roxham Road, which is accurate. But a huge percentage of those people are gone. They're no longer here. They entered through Quebec, doesn't mean that they stayed here.
Right.
So there are perceptions, and I think we have to be careful with who we listen to, how it's framed. There are, for better or for worse, there are columnists out there that are very, because of cultural insecurities, language insecurities, people will frame immigration as nothing more than a liability. And these people, it's framed, the conversation becomes automatically as something that is a problem, forgetting about the fact, that migration is not only needed, but it brings in so many added benefits to this country, right, and to this province. I think the way we discuss it, I think the fact that I mentioned earlier, we're living in post-pandemic times. Canada, like other countries, is dealing with a lot of the consequences of that, right? Housing and everything has gotten more expensive. Canadians are concerned. And it's an easy button to push. It's an easy kind of scapegoat to kind of say, immigrants have created this. And I think we need to take a step back and actually look at the numbers and question whether that really is legitimate.
Yeah, and by the way, to your point, and I think, again, this is something maybe people overlook. We don't talk about, a declining birth rate on a regular basis here, but that's in fact what we're dealing with. And we are dealing, secondly, with an aging, as you said, workforce, even to the point where the immigrants that we have brought in are still not enough to be able to basically replace all those people. So clearly we need immigration for the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are studies that show that in a few years, there are going to be more people retiring than actually entering the workforce. So what is the solution? It's very easy to say, oh, we don't want immigrants or we have enough people. But the reality is, no, we don't. We have an aging population. We have, severe labor shortages. We need people. I think the conversation needs to be shifted from, oh, we have too many people, to how do we best make sure to hold our governments, both provincial and federal governments, responsible to make sure that we allocate these funds. It's very easy. Like, for example, with Francisation, with French, right? You have Bill 96. It's very easy for the government to say, oh, after 6 months, people who are coming in need to be able to speak French. But when you have, Quebec's own language commissioner saying the talk hasn't, kind of followed, like what we've done isn't sufficient at all. Like Quebec has failed to keep up with the demand. Then you have a government that's basically just penalizing people who don't speak French yet, but is not allocating the resources to make that happen.
By the way, it's not all, roses and champagne for immigrants coming here as well. There's some stories here is people who've come here expecting, and this used to be the place you would come expecting you could build a future here. I think I saw a figure today in a story in the National Post, 40% of them who have come here are now looking to move.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important to remember that, again, it's about false, this misrepresentation of what immigration is. The vast majority of immigration that comes to Canada are economic migrants. These are people who often have a choice as to where they will go. Right? A lot of them are very highly educated, have the financial resources. They come to Canada because they have this expectation of what this country is all about. And if they're not well accepted, if it's difficult for them to, for their degrees to be recognized, and if their skills are underutilized and it's difficult or the cost of living is too expensive, they'll be like, I'm out of here. I'll go somewhere else.
Right. And that's the situation we face. Now, Toula, I'm out of time. I thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Toula Drimonis, columnist, author, and she's written a couple of books on immigration and asylum seekers.